Welcome to this week's episode of Ask the Buzz. Now this week with me I have Musky guide and lure manufacturer Lee Tauchen. And so we're going to dig into a few questions. You just got off the water earlier today?
Just rolled in off Mille Lacs about an hour ago, and we saw a fish, so it's a widely successful day out there.
Right. Well, right on. Well, let's jump in here. The first question that I have for you, let's see, well, which one should we go with first here? How about this? What is the best tactic for big muskies in late fall during a cold front? It seems like muskies act totally different during a cold front in summer months versus fall months. And that was from Aaron Lang.
Well, one thing, probably the biggest misconception I think about muskies between summer and fall period is that summer you typically don't want a cold front situation. Once we hit typically about end of August to early September, boom, I want a cold front. I want that, what I would call seasonal progression. I think that's the most important thing. And here we are right now, we're in early November. I was actually fishing barefoot today on the middle of the lake because I didn't have my light shoes with. It's too warm right now. These fish want seasonal progression. So I just think it's really important. You want to get that water temps cooling.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Now, during a cold front, what would you tend to be using tactically?
Well, pretty much it'd probably be the same thing as like today when they weren't biting and we weren't catching a fish. We're as fishermen, we kind of tend to do the same thing over and over and over. But to answer your question, usually once you get a cold front situation in the fall, especially this time of year, the fish are way more aggressive. That's the biggest thing I could say about that seasonal progression, and it proves it. As soon as you get a nice north wind, some nice fish start popping up. Mm-hmm. So as far as techniques, late fall, I mean, we're throwing a lot of rubber baits, trolling huge crankbaits, brake line type fishing. But the biggest thing I think about in the fall especially is how deep, once we contact the fish, how deep was that fish sitting in? I try to analyze what the boat is sitting in and how deep my bait is landing in, how deep a water. And so when did maybe the fish pick up onto your bait and start coming in on it? So I'm always thinking about how deep was that fish sitting? So if I want to set up a drift and keep my bait at that particular depth, that's kind of how I think about it.
That makes sense. So I guess just quick to hit on the other end of the spectrum, if you're talking about a summer cold front. I know it's not summer right now, but if somebody's thinking about next summer, how would they approach that?
Well, typically you're slowing down and just trying to get a reaction out of fish. The great thing about guiding, I usually got 2 other people in the boat. So we can throw 3 baits at one time and get it all figured out quicker, which is really nice. But to answer your question there, typically like a glide bait, it's tough to beat a glide bait to really get fish located and trigger a fish in to bite. You got so much time to work with a glide bait. Obviously a guy in the front of the boat is going to be casting a bucktail, something aggressive. Mm-hmm. But being the guy in the back of the boat usually, I can experiment and really kind of see if something else is working perhaps better. But slow is generally a good technique. Slow topwaters. I mean, this dumb-looking piece of cut-off wood is my go-to bait for fishing slow. And surface is a great way, too, in the summertime, to pick fish off that are not willing to chase typical presentations like a bucktail.
Yeah, right on. Well, that's great. That is as good as it gets right there, Aaron.
Thank you.
Okay, well, next question, let's go to big water. Now, how should
today?
yeah, right. How should musky anglers on the Great Lakes, particularly John Carter, who's asking the question, fishes on Lake St. Clair and the connecting rivers, how should he approach muskies differently than people do in other parts of the Midwest?
Like just smaller natural lakes in the comparison?
Yeah, right.
Well, the one thing about Great Lakes muskies is that they're probably more mobile than any muskies I've ever fished on any body of water. That's the number one thing. I mean, those fish move so much. It's almost like you wonder if they're like a shark, where they're always, moving, always swimming, so to speak. And it's really interesting because the biggest thing I think about when I'm fishing big water is I think about what's the prevailing wind, what's the wind direction, how many days has it been from that direction. And basically, when you fish a large body of water like St. Clair or Green Bay, where I spend a lot of time on, those fish are paying huge attention to the wind. Mm-hmm. Which creates a river within the lake, and you're always looking at current seams. When I was out with a couple guys today fishing, when we would get off the edge of a tip of a point, even out in open water miles from shore on Lake Mille Lacs, we'd see these really heavy concentration of foam lines. When you see foam built up from the wave action, it'll actually create a visual, aspect to the current line that's within the lake. And you think of it as a river in the lake, just like you're fishing a wing dam, on a river situation. You'll see that current seam. And fish really relate to that a lot. And you'll see water temperature difference on those seams as well. So that's probably the biggest thing I think on big water is wind. That's the first thing I look at and what I'm going to do each day.
Yeah, fish the foam.
Fish the foam. Yep. One guy with me today, I think, kind of chuckled when I said it. But I'm like, hey, for me, that works. So.
Right. Well, a few months ago, I actually talked to John Bondi, who fishes Lake St. Clair.
There you go.
And we were talking, this was a few months back in summer, and I mean, Lee basically just echoed everything that he told me.
That's good.
So, he talked about wind and the way that, current on the lake, and, actually, like you said, how the fish are kind of, sort of like sharks, because they're pelagic food that they're,
When you're dealing with bodies of water like that, St. Clair, Green Bay, I mean, contour differences of 1 foot is major because you're only talking about, 10, 15 feet of water. So you get a little difference like a foot or even 2. I mean, that's a pretty major difference. So
right on. Very good. Well, let's jump to question number 3. And this one is from Camden Glade. And this is sort of, a real fan favorite. And it's, what are your go-to lures for fall muskies based on water temperature?
Well, the first go-to bait, you look in any musky angler's box, nowadays is typically something rubber. There's definitely a magic about rubber baits in general, whether it's like a Medusa type bait. This particular bait we happen to be starting to throw now. It's a new bait coming out this winter, but basically it's a soft swim bait that you can fish deep easily. This time of year you want to typically have your baits down a little deeper water, but
Lee gets all the secret baits before everybody else
yeah,
does.
well, I don't know about that, but this one's got 252s on it already, so it's definitely been a good trooper for us. But I guess it's not so much what bait you're throwing, it's how you're working it, what speed you're working it, and how deep a water you're working the bait. And this particular bait just happens to run better at a deeper, 8 to 12 feet down, easier than a lot of the other musky baits guys throw are way up in the water column. I think that's in the late season especially, guys really miss out on keeping baits deeper than other guys are fishing. I mean, you take a look at a bucktail, for instance, things running a few feet down most of the time. Mm-hmm. How many musky presentations that you use, often, are you fishing a bait that's deeper than 8 feet down? Not many, really. We're pounding water and we're beating it up and fishing fast. I think that's the next frontier of musky fishing, is fishing baits a lot deeper, and especially in the late fall period. I mean, it doesn't get any more important than that, especially as the water temps get below, especially that below 42 degree range, 45, somewhere in there. I like to actually let these baits sink all the way to the bottom and rip them up off the bottom. And some of the biggest muskies, 40 plus and even 50 pound class fish have happened on that first rip off the bottom.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's cool.
So there's my secret.
Yeah, well, there you have it. What baits were you using out there today?
Today I threw this bait the entire day.
Really?
Yep, and the two other guys I had with, actually, I don't think anyone switched a bait today. So the other Medusa, we're throwing a Medusa all day, and this bait. So those two, I mean, that's my fall lineup right now. So, or if we're gonna get a sandwich, crack a sandwich out and take a break, we got to keep lines in the water, right? So we'll put some, a couple lines behind the boat and troll, and then we'll put out a couple of my pelagic crankbaits, a deeper diving crankbait.
Yeah. So right on.
There's my fall. Simple. The box gets smaller, yet the lure, not really, because the lures get bigger.
Right. Is this a secret lure? Or?
It's the word's on the street now. A paddle tail bait is nothing, different. Obviously, we use sassy shads for years back in the day for walleyes and whatnot. But there's definitely a certain power to a paddle tail bait that needs to be explored in musky baits. This is the new Chaos Tackle Poseidon. It's going to come out this winter at the musky shows at Chicago. And as you can see, this thing is turned into kind of hamburger right there. I even got a cable tie trying to keep it together because it's caught so many fish.
It's a good sign. So, well, speaking of new baits, you have your own musky bait company?
Yes.
Which is called?
Lee Lures Custom Baits.
And you guys have anything new and interesting coming up here?
Maybe. I haven't put it out there yet,
okay.
but I just wanted to make sure it's right exactly where I want it. But I will say, this flap tail bait, which I've made for about 3 years now, actually. This is, for us, this is my go-to bait, especially in the back of the boat. It's a slow bait. You got to fish it slow, got to be patient. I know, musky guys aren't patient, right? They want to throw and reel really fast. Well, there's an advantage to fishing slow, whether you're drop shotting for smallmouth. Everybody knows how deadly that is. This is basically my comparison to drop shotting smallmouth for muskies. Ultra slow top water, slow and steady, and when they eat it, they don't miss.
Wow.
So that's the flap tail. Yep.
Flap tail.
Like Hedden used to have a flap tail back in the day. It's basically just a rendition of that. So I'm telling you, it's crazy.
Wow. And you said, what percentage of fish do you land on this? You were telling me earlier.
It's close to 90%. It's the best. You got the spreader bars. That's the key there. They usually hit the head of it. But then you got the insurance policies hanging on the back there where you actually can get those fish in the boat. In musky
fishing, it's nice to have an insurance policy.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Right on. Well, thanks for coming on here. Is there anywhere else that people can check you out?
Absolutely, yep. You can check me out at leetauchen.com or at leelures.com. Those are my two websites. Check me out on Facebook as well, of course.
Right on. Well, I appreciate you coming on. When it comes to musky fishing, it doesn't get a lot better than Lee here, so it's been a real treat. So until next week, we will see you on Ask the Buzz.